He has no idea this BMW is coming out of his food budget.
I might be addicted to cheap silver BMWs. Earlier this year, I bought that 2006 325xi for a very low price and it's turned out okay. And now I've done it again. I bought this 2014 650i Grand Coupe for a very low price. And before I get too far into it, let me give you some background.
As much as I love my LX470 as a daily, it really isn't all that fun to drive. It's much more of a family car for soccer moms, which is weird because I'm not a soccer mom. So I've been casually looking at sports sedans for sale such as the Audi S7 and Mercedes CLS class to have a fun weekend car to cruise around in. Decent examples seem to hover around the 30k mark, but all of that changed when I found this BMW 650i for sale at a local auction. This BMW 650i would have retailed new for over $100,000 with all of its options, including the M Sport and the M Appearance packages. What stands out about this model in particular is that in 2014, the F06 chassis was equipped with the upgraded N63 2U engine as opposed to the standard N63 engine. This upgraded N63 2U fixed a lot of the problematic issues of the original N63 and featured nearly an extra 50 horsepower. So this begs the question, why would I even take a chance on such a high mileage example? Well, I pulled the Carfax on this car and it showed that it was actually a one-owner car its entire life, before it showed up at the auction. And this car was serviced at the dealership its entire lifetime. There are over 50 service records from that dealer, and everything from basic oil changes to replacing the rear diff. With how good this car looks and the extensive service history, this owner took care of it, and I felt that for the right price, it was worth the risk. But it would be naive of me to think that this car would show up in an auction without any problems, and this one does have a problem, in the form of a service light and drivetrain fault. Now it's time to get the old BMW out and put the new one in. So this car has a check engine light. Now I'm going to go ahead and use my pretty fancy code scanner. This is a AutoFix D1 Pro. It's a pretty neat bi-directional scanner. I'm going to go ahead and plug this in and start reading codes so I can figure out what's wrong here. Alright, so it looks like we have 3 codes that are stored in the DME and then one that is in the DME2. This vehicle actually has 2 DMEs, one for each bank. So let's check the first one and read the codes. If you want to check out this scan tool or any other tool I use on the channel, go ahead and head to our Amazon affiliates page down below. Looks like we have 3 codes popping up. The one that we're really interested in is the second code for the vanos system, telling us that the exhaust vanos system is not functioning during cold start. With the vanos system not functioning properly, it puts the car in low power mode, as indicated by the first code. Scan tool offers 2 possible solutions for this code, one being the actual vanos exhaust solenoid and the other being the camshaft position sensor. Now let's take a look at for the second DME. So our exhaust vanos code on the one bank is causing both of our DMEs to go into limp mode, so that should be pretty straightforward. Alright, the BMW is in the garage now and we're ready to start working on this. So first things to take note here is that this engine bay is extremely tightly packed, and I cannot emphasize that enough. The vanos solenoids on the N52 engine, if you saw the last BMW video I did, those vanos solenoids are on the front of the engine and they're super easy to replace, take a 5-minute job. For this, they're also on the front of the engine, but they are behind the intercoolers. So these intercooler, or at least on one side of the vehicle, they're going to have to be taken off. That means all this plastic, intake, intercoolers, all that stuff needs to get out of the way before we can reach the actual vanos solenoids. And since it's only one side of the engine that's throwing the code, I'm only going to replace the one side, but I'm going to replace both the intake and exhaust at the same time. That's kind of the standard operating procedure. Step 1 here is just to remove the plastic engine cover to expose the rat's nest of wires and hoses. From there, I'm removing the strut support so we can start taking apart the intake system. Next, I'm working on removing the coolant reservoir for the intercoolers and fight to get off every quick connect fitting. With the coolant reservoir gone, we can start working on removing some more evap system lines and connections and work on removing the 3 hidden bolts holding the intercooler in place. Alright,
Finally got the intercooler out. It was definitely a pain in the butt to get this out. Thankfully, whoever did this before actually notched this bottom bracket so I didn't have to take the bolt out all the way. That'll make reinstalling this so much easier. Intercooler out and the throttle body moved out of the way. That exposed the intake vanos solenoid, which was easy to remove. The exhaust solenoid is just above it to the right. And when it comes to these vanos solenoids, I'm only going to be using original BMW parts as I don't want to use cheap Chinese crap on such a critical component. With the vanos solenoids replaced, installation is just reverse of disassembly, and it's just that easy. Alright, job is now completed. Hopefully everything is buttoned up. Put the engine cover back on and fill this up with coolant because this is empty now, and then start this up. Hopefully the codes go away and we don't have to do this again. Alright, the car started up first time and no check engine light anymore. So I think that actually fixed the problem, but to double check, I'm going to take it on a short test drive, make sure it doesn't come back. So replacing the vanos solenoids did not fix the problem, but there is one other easy solution that it could be, and that is the camshaft position sensor. The sensor should be just under the airbox on top of the valve cover. Should be pretty easy to get to compared to the vanos solenoids. If it is not the camshaft position sensor, then I have a feeling that it could actually be the actual phaser on the camshaft itself, and that means taking off the valve cover, which would be a much bigger job. When removing the charge pipe for the turbo, something didn't look right. I don't think it should be doing that. But don't worry, I'm going to get a new one. Alright, this is the exhaust camshaft sensor, so just need the e-Torx socket to get it out, unplug the connector, and then it'll be good to go. Alright, in my left hand I have the old camshaft position sensor, in my right hand I have the new one. I went ahead and also got a new O-ring at the same time to replace, just to prevent any oil leaks from occurring, but there we go. Alright, I was putting the engine cover back on and I just noticed this crankcase ventilation pipe is broken. And there's like disintegrating plastic on the inside. Yeah, BMW and disintegrating plastic. Alright, it's been a few days and the BMW is back in the garage because we have a new CCV hoses. These are going to be hopefully relatively easy to replace since they're just on top of the engine. And hopefully the other connectors are hard to get to. So, let's get to it. You can see this is half of the system here. And it just broke off. The other half is still in there. 2 bolts to remove the oil separator, and then everything comes out. Alright, the connector from here actually broke off somewhere in here where it connects into this plug here. Not sure if it actually went down into the engine bay or if it went down the little pipe because it was a small piece, and I want to make sure it doesn't get ingested by the turbo, so I'm taking that off. Oh Jesus. Lots of oil in here. Alright, in there you can see some oil that's actually pulled up in front of the turbo. And that's what will happen when the crankcase ventilation isn't working correctly. New crankcase ventilation hose is installed. Now is this time to button everything up. Again, installation is just reverse of removal. Alright, everything is back together. So now we have the new hose. This seemed to be a little too long to fit in here. Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do about that. That's what you get for not buying the original BMW part. Alright, we got the BMW out on the road now to give it a little bit of a road test. I've actually driven this car around for the last 100 or so miles, and you would have no idea that this car has over 200,000 miles on it. This drives is perfectly smooth, it sounds so good, it feels so good,
nothing really in here is completely worn out that you would expect with a 200,000 mile car. There's very little road noise that comes from inside into the cabin, and just everything looks and feels so nice. Ever since I did do the vanos solenoids and the exhaust camshaft sensor, the vanos code still shows up every now and then, which is unfortunate because that means there's something else wrong with it. But I think those two components were probably on their way out. The default only shows up on like a really cold start. Otherwise, it doesn't show up at all. And honestly, if it did show up on a cold start, it tends to go away on its own after driving it for a couple miles. So, well, I don't know. I'll look into it. Obviously, I'll look into the fault code a little bit further and see what the actual problem is. But at this point, it may be something a bit more internal, and that could be the actual vanos phaser itself that's on the end of the camshaft, which is a lot more work than just doing the vanos solenoids or the camshaft sensor. When I first purchased the vehicle, it did have a low coolant light. I did fill up the cooling system and actually vacuum bled it to make sure that there's no air bubbles in it or anything, and the cooling system has been rock steady. It hasn't lost any coolant since I vacuum filled it. So honestly, I'm not quite sure how it managed to lose coolant, and after 100 miles or so, I would have expected a little bit of coolant loss. Alright, let's go ahead and give this car a little bit of a pull and test out the acceleration. And pulls healthy and strong, so that was like from, you know, a rolling start up to about 50 miles an hour, and we got there very quickly. From the factory, this car had a 0 to 60 time of somewhere around 4.5 seconds, and I think that's still there. What I would like to do in the future might be the typical BMW owner move of downpipes in a tune, and that would really wake this thing up, just make it sound crispy. You can really tell this car was meant to be used on the Autobahn. This thing, I'm doing 80 miles an hour right now on the highway, and you can barely feel it. The car, again, with 200,000 miles, you expect things to be shaking and rattling and everything, but this car is just rock steady, no shaking, no rattling, and it really just is such a pleasant driving experience. I really do enjoy this.
Well, that is going to wrap up this video now. If you liked the video, hit that like button, and if you want to catch more videos on this BMW or videos like it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well. If you want to support the channel, we have some merch. That'll help make sure that Fritz actually gets fed. So if you want to support us, go ahead and do that. And don't forget to check out the Amazon affiliates link with all the tools that we used in this video.